Welcome, Inklings, to all new First Issues, the weekly #1 comic review show. These are the pulls from the week of April 27th, 2016. Let's kick things off with, oh lord, Marvel's Avengers Standoff, Assault on Pleasant Hill Omega #1. Written by Nick Spencer, art by Daniel Acuna and Angel Unzueta, and colors by Daniel Acuna and Matt Wilson. You know, it's not fair that an entire event happened in between when I covered the Alpha in all new First Issues #1 and me covering this now. But it's not like anything major happened. The end of the first one was Zemo ready to take Pleasant Hill hostage, and that's what's about to be broken up here by the Avengers. And why is that? Well, apparently there were major differences between all the Avenger teams while they were assaulting Pleasant Hill. Oh, and Steve Rogers is now de-aged. All the while, the villains have been trying to trap the little girl who has reality-altering powers. Yes, this marks the 15th little kid with reality powers in the Marvel Universe, so I think someone gets a cupcake. But anyways, the Avengers rally against the villains, and we get introduced to a new Quasar. After the fighting is done, Steve agrees with Sam that it's okay for two Captain Americas to be running around now. Oh, and Red Skull is around again, but that was just a random one-panel dun-dun-dun kind of moment to go, hey, guess who Steve's gonna be fighting, heh? Civil War's coming out, you know. Actually, I don't know why they throw Red Skull in for Civil War, so that might have just been a cheap jab. I'm sorry. There's truly not a lot to say. In the end of a storyline that seems to solely exist to go, and here's what's coming up, even though we've got Civil War 2 right around the corner, so really there's probably going to be a lot more dangling stories that will wrap up too quickly, lazily, or just forgotten about. While Nick Spencer's writing is not bad, not even remotely, nor is the art, though there is parts of it where you can tell were handled by fill-in artists and colorists, or they just didn't mesh well together, but they are named, so it's at least something for them. Overall, I'll eventually do a real review of this storyline, but until then, if you liked the Avengers books, then you've already probably seen portions of this story, since, you know, all Avengers are in here to randomly fight. So the Omega issue is fairly skippable, not just because it's, you know, the ending of a storyline, but as a preview for what's to come. You may want to read it if you really want to get lip service about why some books are starting. So if that event ended in mediocrity, then let's see what's happening in the realm of the strange. Marvel's Doctor Strange, Last Days of Magic #1, with 3 separate stories written and drawn by 3 separate teams. Yep, The Last Days of Magic. You know, that thing that Scarlet Witch was investigating? At least I think that's what she was doing. Well, hey, who cares, because Doctor Strange is selling, so it's his plot now. Or maybe Scarlet Witch was trying to steal his story? Either way, we've got 3 stories here following 3 separate masters of magic being attacked by people known as the Empirical. Short of it is that this is actually just a secondary bit to what's happening in Doctor Strange's book, which a few people have told me is doing pretty well, so maybe this is actually a really great thing to immerse yourself in that story. But the art for each bit is good, even a couple moments where you see some very throwback art styles that I do dig a lot. And the stories themselves are fairly distinct, showing El Medico Mystical, who seems to be rented from Lucha Underground, Dr. Voodoo, and The Woo. So ultimately, I think that while it's readable by itself, it's a companion to a Doctor Strange book proper, so I'd say check that out first and then come back to this to get the complete feel. So for my next comic, should I bring up that it used to be a Marvel property? IDW's Micronauts #1, written by Cullen Bunn, breakdowns by David Baldeon, with a slew of people doing the finishes and the colors. Sorry, there's a lot of you. So the plot is kind of the most cliched one you can think of. A team led by a brash but kind leader gets hired by a guy to do a thing, but the medical supplies they're supposed to scavenge aren't there. Honestly, I was really hopeful seeing that this was on my pull. I've read the Marvel Micronauts stuff, and it was really nothing like this. But this honestly feels like the most standard start to a story you can have. The Microverse is your stock universe. The characters, while they can have some fun banter, are straight riffs of every sci-fi comic you've ever read. But what really lets this down, I think, is the fact that you've got 8 people doing inks and colors, or finishes, whatever that means, which really changes how the art throughout a simple, standard-length comic looks. I mean, Baldeon's structure is great, just you can really see different personal arts leaking through from everyone else. But honestly, the biggest problem is that this world has been fleshed out before, in both the toys and even the Marvel comics. So it shouldn't have been that hard to break out from, well, Marvel standard space comic. I have to say that this may have actually been Cullen Bunn having not gotten a main gig on a Marvel space book, letting that pour out in this. Okay, I need to get to a verdict fast, and that is that this is skippable. But just because it didn't start well doesn't mean that it won't grow to being better. I do really need to start doing first issue follow-ups for books like this, and maybe when I have the views to warrant that. Anyways, let's see what else IDW has to offer with IDW's The X-Files #1, written by Joe Harris, art by Matthew Dow Smith, and colors by Jordi Belair. This is just an update to the IDW X-Files brand after the special miniseries that updated the show officially. So the plot is that an employee of the month shoots up a mall asking if they can see the lights. So Mulder and Scully are called in to investigate, but things get even more crazy as the survivors of that shooting act in the same fashion, shooting officers and whatnot as they investigate, asking too if they can see the lights. But whatever it is, now Scully and Mulder may have been contaminated with it as well. IDW's X-Files series has always been at least readable. Even at their worst, they've just been a bog standard episode of the show, which is still better than bad. And this is actually a really interesting issue, from the case itself to the dynamics of the characters, and generally just all of the trademarks of a truly good X-Files story. What I particularly enjoy is the artwork, which actually skews on the dark side to really match the style of the show. Similarly, it keeps the actors not perfectly on model, but at the same time, any panel you can safely go, oh yeah, that's totally David Duchovny or Gillian Anderson. So this is definitely a solid start to a good story, and what's even better is that there's a reading guide to all other X-Files books in the back, so you can go and get the rest. I know I'm missing a couple. Unfortunately, I didn't get the super awesome strawberry scented special for this next book. IDW's Strawberry Shortcake #1, written by Georgia Ball, art by Amy Meberson, and colors by Fernando Peniche. So Strawberry and friends are faced against the YouTube's star Steve Pieman, who's none other than the peculiar Purple Pie Man. This is set in the new Strawberry Shortcake thing that I have no knowledge of, so I'm coming in pretty green, and it wasn't bad. The art looks really good, matching up with what I can find of the new show, and writing-wise, well, it's fairly good. Well, I wouldn't say that it was an immediate must-own as quickly as the MLP comics were, but I think that it works for what it does. My only problem with this on a creative level would be that making Steve Pieman a YouTube star, there seems to be some awkward updating here that doesn't necessarily allow for the full use of the character. However, from what I've been told, he hasn't appeared in the main show yet, so there's a possibility that later on we've got a not the real one kind of situation. So that's basically it. My verdict is that unlike some of the other IDW licensed stuff, if you're not a fan of this series proper, I don't think it'll make you a fan. However, it is one of those buys that I would say could definitely be good for a blind buy for any preteen kiddie in your life. Or if you're a fan of the show, then you may enjoy it too. Even more licensed comics, but now we gallop over to Dark Horse Comics, Aliens Defiance #1, written by Brian Wood, art by Tristan Jones, and colors by Dan Jackson. So Weyland-Yutani do what it do, and has some colonial marines go to catch a xenomorph. And that's basically what this first issue does. This doesn't do anything new, at least in this issue. We focus on Zula, the lead character, and her being placed in a fairly well-known and kinda cliché plot for the Aliens franchise. However, like Star Wars Episode 7, you can do all that's done before to get people up to speed so that going forward, new and wonderful things can happen. And I think that's where Brian Wood is leading here. Basically, a whole film of premise gets put into this first issue, but in doing so, we've already gotten past the reveal that Weyland-Yutani ain't exactly squeaky clean, and could possibly explain why it's called Defiance. Plus, the art is really good at keeping the cramped and 80s retro future for the movie intact, as well as being great artistically, being gritty and yet still have that creepy air when dealing with the xenomorphs. So if you're an Aliens fan but have been let down by some of the other offerings, you know, that one certain video game that was stupid and tainted everything in the 21st century, go and give this a buy. Hopefully it'll get the taste out of your mouth, and hopefully it'll lead in the direction that it seems to be pointing at. And now, time for the boom. Boom Studios' Over the Garden Wall #1, written by Jim Campbell, Danielle Burgess, and Amalia Lavari, with art by Jim Campbell and Kara McGee. Good news, everyone! Over the Garden Wall now has an ongoing comic series! There's actually 2 stories in this, one revolving around Greg going back to the strange world over the garden wall while he's asleep, and Anna, the woodsman daughter from the show, surviving in the woods alone. Now, fundamentally, I was blown away by the show when it came out. Thanks Cell Specs for that. But this, well, I said it in a review of the miniseries it had a year or so ago. Not sure if it was in one of my classic first issues or not. What I said is that basically, what I liked about the show personally was the dark oddity and just strange creepiness to the world rather than the humor it brought. Because its current style of humor, I know a lot of people enjoy, but I just can't really get behind it all that much. So if that's what you're into, it nails it perfectly. However, it was in the Anna story that really got me into that same feeling of macabre weirdness without being overtly horror that really got to me. That classical unsettling feeling just oozes out of it, and by God does it work so well. So while personally it is a hit and miss comic, professionally I can safely say that this is totally worth a buy for fans of the show. And if you aren't a fan of the show, even in a vacuum, I think that this works out fairly well as a solid starter to the series proper, even though you will be coming in a bit lost. And we end the licensed avalanche this week with Titan Comics Vikings #1, written by Kevin Scott, art by Staz Johnson, with colors by Richard Elson. Well, let's go pillaging England with the cast of Vikings. Well, okay, not the actual cast, but you know, the characters of Vikings, and all the politics, culture, and personality that comes with it. Vikings is an awesome show. It's historically awesome and acted really well, and just totally sweet all around. And frankly, the comic is just as epic as the show. Kevin Scott nails the characters and the setting, and just the universe as a whole, with the same gravitas that comes from the History Channel show itself. And the art is very faithful to the show insofar as that it keeps the characters and the feel of the world, especially with the different looks for the 2 major locations that, and I know some found jarring, I thought worked really well to contrast the world within. So if you're a fan of Vikings, be it historically, romantically, or the show proper, this is a must-own. Fun little fact, while working on the title cards for this, I actually spelled Kevin Scott's name right, because I spelled it wrong last time I gave one of his comics a glowing review, but I spelled Vikings with 2 T's. Don't ask me, Vitings sounds great. But anyways, I do honestly think that if you're a fan of Vikings as a concept, or just as a general group of Norse people, you will love this comic, and if you've never seen the show, it'll probably get you to watch the show. And the last comic of this week is an Italian. Hot damn. Black Masks, 4 Kids Walk Into a Bank #1, written by Matthew Rosenberg and art by Tyler Boss. So this kid's dad is being hired to perform a bank heist by kinda stupid criminals, so it's up to 11-year-old Paige and her friends to pull off a heist so her dad doesn't go to jail. That is the simplest way to put forth this comic. On the Comixology page, they brought up a comparison that I think works better than anything that I could really say. It's like if Wes Anderson remade Reservoir Dogs. It's very dark, but within that darkness, there's a great brevity and just this overall je ne sais quoi to it. If I had to compare the tone and feel of this comic to anything else, it would actually be Brian K. Vaughan's Runaways. Only instead of being buried neck deep in superhero genre, it's taking a headfirst dive into the crime genre. And it's glorious. And the art is freaking sweet. That's where I definitely say that it gets Wes Anderson-y, because every location really kind of feels like a Broadway set, with great framing, and even the wallpaper seems to just scream the Grand Budapest Hotel. This is freaking awesome, and you should be reading it right now. And that's all for this week. It was a fantastic week in comics, but we aren't done yet. Come back after the ad break to see a Flashback Firsty on Red Hood and the Outlaws, Manga Firsty on Sanctuary, and Webcomics FIRSTISH on Sleepless Domain. See you in less than a minute. Welcome back, true believers. We've got an interesting bunch of things to get into, so let's just hop into it. The Flashback Firsty this week is a controversial one. Original release September 21st, 2011. This is Red Hood and the Outlaws #1, written by Scott Lobdell, pencils by Kenneth Rochefort, with inks and colors by Blonde. First issue is that Roy Harper gets saved from being executed by Red Hood and Starfire and joins them in their adventures. Yeah, the first issue is fairly stiffly entering the adventures to go forward. Now, this issue sparked a lot of controversy when it came out because there's literally a metric ton to swallow that changed from the post-crisis continuity to the New 52. Arsenal is back to being a teen who hasn't even had a kid or any of the adventures that made him a fan favorite, plus a stupid trucker hat. Red Hood is now part of some mystic order and has stupid lips on his helmet. And then there's Starfire. Oh, sweet Christmas Starfire. Okay, so Starfire was a big shock to a lot of people because she wasn't like the most popular version of the character, the one from the cartoon Teen Titans. But even on the comic front, she's very different than the woman we saw grow since Perez and Wolfman made a very alien girl who was so open to the world and wanting to understand it, feeling all emotions and such that worked and allowed for the character to grow for better or worse. But in this, she's been a slave, and she still feels such strong emotions, but by this point, she's broken. She'll sleep with whatever because meh, and that did rub people the wrong way. Also, she had a really stupid outfit. The thing is, and I've been saying this for a few years now, these three heroes are totally broken when we meet them at the start of this narrative, and we're meant to not inherently think them good because they aren't. And as the narrative moved forward, we see the softening and changing of Starfire into both a better outfit and understanding her emotions. Arsenal growing into a much more experienced person, and Red Hood, well, Red Hood is still a character I just don't give a damn about by himself, but even he grows as a character throughout this. I can't really give a solid verdict on this because within the past 5 years, people have already made up their mind about how bad this series is, and it's become an example of how horrible DC is. Yet, I urge you to give the full first volume a read, and see how the team forms, and then how the characters pull themselves from the mud they were in to become better because of it. Or, failing that, read this and then see how much 5 years has done for the character of Starfire, especially in her new book, which is quite rad. Now for manga Firsty. I wasn't sure what to make of this after seeing the cover, but it was suggested by Trey Pratchett, so hey, can't be all that bad. So, originally released by Big Comic Superior in 1999, this is Sanctuary, written by Sho Fumimura and illustrated by Ryoichi Ikegami. This is, of course, just a look at the first chapter of Volume 1, which is also called Sanctuary. Oh, the Yakuza and the Diet should be friends. Oh, the Yakuza and the Diet should be friends. Okay, so no, it's not exactly Oklahoma, but it's good. Two friends have taken very drastic directions in their life. Akira Hojo is a small-time mobster, and Chiaki Asami is a political advisor for the Japanese Diet, which is just the legislature, so maybe it'd be better to call it the Kokai? But either way, this first chapter shows them doing their thing in their respective paths before meeting up and being friends. The first chapter really does introduce these leads fairly well, showing Hojo as a charismatic Yakuza who has no qualms getting his hands dirty, and Asami as a determined next prime minister. And that's the whole of the series in a nutshell. Both men have taken their respective paths to unify Japan, Asami striving to become the next prime minister, and Hoji wanting to unify the Yakuza under his banner. As a whole, this series really is a great drama, showing the rise of these two characters with their grand goals and the interactions that brings. It's a superb drama, and the art really keeps the realism, which makes it no wonder that in '95 there was a live-action adaptation. So if you enjoy crime dramas, this is one of the quintessential manga reads on the matter, and was even a bestseller when it came out. Currently, translations for Sanctuary are available through Viz Media. And finally, this webcomic Firstish was suggested by Daniel Wenzik. Originally launched April 6, 2015, this is Sleepless Domain, written by Mary Cube Kaggle. Chapter 1 and 2 are drawn by Oscar Vega. I'm telling you right now, Sleepless Domain is a Magic Girl webcomic. Does that lessen my enjoyment of it? No, not even remotely. In fact, even if I wasn't from a time when you didn't have that much of a choice so you had to grow a liking to the magical girl genre, this is still superb overall. Chapter 1 is straightforward, showing Team Alchemical, the 5 magical girls, working together to stop some standard monster types during a routine night. For you see, the city is super safe during the day, but at night, like clockwork in fact, monsters come and the girls are there to stop them. It's become so routine that there's even a curfew at night, so everyone's indoors except for the girls themselves. And when it comes to the girls, they've got a great assortment of personalities to match their respective elements. And while they do know how to work as a team, they don't exactly get along perfect. All of that really works to flesh out the team and show how they mesh before the main story proper follows. And the art really matches with both the aesthetics of the universe being put forth and the colorful nature of the magical girl genre. So I think that it's safe to say that this is a great read, and most definitely something that, if anything I've said has ever gotten you curious, you'll be most definitely enjoying this. Even if you're one of those people who are all, oh, I don't do magical girl genre, I would still wager that you'd have some enjoyment from this. And that's all for this week. If you agree or disagree or have a suggestion for any of the flashback segments, please leave a comment below. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Bradley Nephilim and like the Archivist on Facebook. Again, all links down below. And like and share this video around, cause help the show by making the channel grow. Yeah, apparently that's the catchphrase I'm going with. Sorry. I'm the Archivist, and stay golden, Inklings.